All right, to begin this final video, what I need you to have on screen, loaded into your table of contents, is the big Pine watershed boundary that we've been working with, and then also the cropland data layer that was available in Brightspace. Remember, you may have to extract two separate folders to completely unzip all of this data and gain access to that layer. There's a few things I didn't get a chance to show you in the last video. One of those being is that, it's often helpful to be able to see through. Now, while this is not quite as easy as Photoshop, I can tell you that once you have selected a raster data set, you can come into Appearance and go in and actually change up and down how visible that is. All right, so that's one way to look at your data. A different way to look at it, so you can actually use, it's called the swipe tool. The swipe tool allows you to actually scroll that data up and down, right? And so it gives you some options for being able to take a look at your data that way. When you're all said and done with that, you can go back over to Map and click on Explore, and it allows you to kind of move back and forth again in this. Now, we're going to be working with, or we're going to be looking at the data just inside of the Big O Plain watershed. And so there's a few tools that I need you to work on. One of those things is that we need to go ahead and turn on an extension. So in order to actually process and work with raster data sets, you actually need an extension called Spatial Analyst. It's available under the Project tab. You go into Licensing. What you're going to have to do is come down to configure your license settings. Now, this could take a few minutes. If it's taking more than, say, 10 seconds for this to come up and load for you, it's likely that you have more than one ArcGIS Pro or ArcMap environment open. You can only have one open at a time in order to make changes here. So what you need to do is go ahead and go down and make sure you've clicked on the Spatial Analyst button. As soon as you clicked on it to turn your license on, all you have to do is hit OK and jump back in, and now a whole set of tools has become available to you. Those tools are actually here under Toolboxes. If we go down to the Spatial Analyst tools, you're going to see that all of these different tools become available. The one we're going to be working with is called Extract by Mask. Now, I've already taught you about Clip in previous videos, and when you're working with vector data, you can actually take one layer and use it as a boundary to cut out, like a cookie cutter, information from another layer. Unfortunately, Clip only works for vector, and so here in raster you need a different set of tools to do the exact same thing. I, for a long time, have argued that Extract by Mask should just be called Clip for rasters. It would make so much more sense, I think, to everybody involved. But we're going to go ahead and open up this tool. We're going to tell it that we want to go ahead and cut down our cropland data layer, and so my CDL that we're going to cut out, or the boundary we're going to use, is we're going to make sure HUC10 boundary selection. I've got it over here. It's got this red boundary on it, HUC10 boundary selection. That should work out pretty well for me. I am going to just go have it drop in there, and I'm going to go ahead and label this out as Big Pine CDL. I think I already have one saved, and so I need to make sure I don't double up on the name of this. I'm just going to call it CDL1 just to help me make sure I'm not overwriting another file. I'm going to go ahead and click Run. This is going to take a few minutes. This is a heavy processing task for most computers, and so you can see it has a scroll bar there at the bottom. It's running through the process. Looks like this is going to go ahead and cut through this pretty fast. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. Extract by Mask is one of those tools that crashes computers. If you don't have a fast enough processor, this tool can just grind everything to a halt and basically make ArcGIS environment lockdown. There are some options for you there if you're having problems with it. One of those is that right now I'm saving my output raster into my geo database as part of my project folder. And that is a fantastic way to make sure that all of my data ends up in the same location at the end of the project. At the end of the project, I'm basically keeping and maintaining all of my data in one place. If that's not working for you, or if this crashes, or if something locks up on you, you can always come back in here to tell it where to save, and you can actually tell it to save to the C drive, right? You can see right now mine's set up to go out to a server. Sometimes coming back to the hard drive can be your workaround for using Extract by Mask. For right now, I'm going to go ahead and hit pause, let this finish running, and then I will jump in and start walking you through the rest of the process. All right, so that went ahead and processed through. For me, it took several minutes for that to actually pop up. So don't be afraid to go ahead and let that run and step away. from your computer and then come back a few minutes later. But you're going to see that instead of kind of the nice symbology that was here previously, what I've got now is that I've got a black and white version of this data. And what's going on behind this is that my symbology is actually all messed up. And so, you know, anytime that we're working with a raster and it runs through a process, we want to go ahead and change this up. So we can come over to our symbology tab, go ahead and change this up. The grid works based on unique values, right? And so I'm going to go ahead and apply this real fast, and you're going to see a rainbow start to pop up here in front of me. But we can make a lot of sense of this rainbow relatively quickly. I mean, have been a lot of attempts to create legend files and go ahead and import a legend file and come in and drop it in. But for me, you know, I can generally kind of walk through this process relatively fast and change it up to something that makes sense. So I'm actually just going to show you how I would go about doing this, and then I'll let you kind of finish it out. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and just change out all of the different crop types over to just a light yellow. I mean, reason for it is relatively simple, that right now we're going to focus here in a minute really on the forests that are here, and so I'm just trying to kind of visualize what's there. In addition to that, I'm going to probably jump down and I will go ahead and change out some of the developed land uses. Again, they've got them kind of separated out by different types. But for me right now, I'm just going to go ahead and block them all, even including the open space. If it's considered kind of in that category, oops, probably ought to have them all be the same color red. Go ahead and drop them in that way. And then, you know, you can walk your way through this. Now, I'll let you go ahead and work your way through the process of color coding each of these different layers. But basically, group the trees, group the wetlands, group the grasslands, and group the crops. All right, and I'll let you go ahead and look through just my list here. If there's anything that you stumbled across that just didn't quite line up with what you were thinking. You know, the one that might stump you is triticale. Triticale is actually a cover crop, but it's part of a cropping system. And so, I mean, I even played around a little bit with some of the kind of the, you know, pasture, you know, small grains and, you know, pasture-based crops like alfalfa that are, you know, cut for animal feed, kind of adding those in. But you're going to see that even as I zoom in there, there's a couple kind of these lighter green spots that, you know, show up here and there. But vast majority of this is just row crop, and you see the roads are popping out, you know, and some of the towns and developed uses around here, right? Vast majority of what we're seeing looks grassland and pasture. I left the wrong color. I need to make sure I get those corrected, right? And see the grasses pop back in. Again, very minimal in terms of, you know, development within this watershed. What I'm really interested in doing though is that I really want to know about just the forest cover that's along the stream. And so I need a couple of things for this. One of those being is that I actually need a stream layer. And so I'm going to go back into my ArcGIS Online. I'm going to type in Indiana stream, you know, rivers, lakes. Let's see what pops up here as I search for that. I mean, there's a number of different, you know, possible, you know, ways of going about doing this. I could, you know, go ahead and look here kind of broadly. I'll be honest with you, I'm not seeing exactly what I'm hunting for pop up here. That doesn't look like it's Indiana based. So I'm going to go ahead and just do what we were doing in a previous video, which is go ahead and try and leverage Indiana map. And when I go into Indiana map, oops, that's the wrong version of Indiana map that I'm looking for. Let's see here. It's hiding on me. There it is. Go into Indiana map, go into an environment. I'm going to go ahead and hit pause real quick while I go ahead and find the layer I'm looking for, and then I'll make sure I point you in the right direction as well. And I have to admit that this is one of those things that, as much as there's some upside to ArcGIS Online, this is one of those simple things that should be available, but honestly, through the Indiana map, you know, ArcGIS Online homepage, they actually don't have this layer. I think they're counting on the national data set. The national data set is called the NHD, National Hydrological Database for Indiana. And so I had to just kind of back up and go look for this. As I went ahead and checked in to make sure that, you know, I would have something here, this ended up being, you know, even messier just trying to look through and find the right find the right type of feature. What I ended up finding is that I found just down here in the list, I found this map image layer where I can get into NHD and go ahead and load this up, and it should go ahead and populate here, right, just for the state of Indiana, all of our streams and waterways. And that's all we need for this exercise at this point. So you can look for this rivers NHD. You can probably just type rivers NHD Indiana and get this layer to pop up. But you'll see it's got what I'm looking for. I could go to the, I can always go and download this from another website and bring it in if I prefer to go about it that way. But what we need to do now is that I want to show you just a quick step process to how we would isolate out land cover information about the forest canopy along this waterway. So what we're going to do first is that we're actually going to go in, and I want to just go ahead and clip out the waterway itself from that boundary. So I'm going to go ahead and run that, pause, and I'm going to expect you to go ahead and run the clip tool. Just go ahead and cut down the river layer into our watershed. All right, the next thing I want you to do, now that we've got this cut out, just the major riverway through our watershed here, next thing I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and buffer this out. And so the buffer tool, I want you to create a 1,000-foot buffer from the water, or from this center line of the river out from there. I'm going to go ahead and pause while I do this. Just a couple of quick reminders. Remember, you need to set your units, and you also need to go ahead and set your dissolve type to all. Dissolve all output features. Now, if everything went successfully, what you should have is you should have a 1,000-foot buffer. And again, we can go ahead and we could come down here and we could confirm that with the measure tool and certainly work our way through that. But what we're really interested in is we're interested where this buffer overlaps with forest. In order to do this, we actually have to go ahead and process our land cover layer. What I mean by process is that we need to go ahead and reclassify so that we have all of these other values. So everything that's not forest, we want to go ahead and strip out of that layer. In order to do that, we're actually going to use a tool called reclassify. And reclassify allows us to go in and actually change things up. Don't use the 3D Analyst tool version of this. Go ahead and use the Spatial Analyst tool version of this. And we're going to go ahead and drop in, and I want my CDL1, right? And what you're going to see here is we're going to reclassify based on class names. What I want to go ahead and do here is I want to go ahead and actually change this up, and I'm actually going to say no data is my value, and I'm going to do that for everything that's not a forest. And so it's actually not letting me do that. Let's see. Let's go ahead and just delete them out then. All right, we'll see if it'll let me do that. Delete. It's really not. All right, let me go ahead and just do this for now. Let's go ahead and just change them up to zeros. You just have to hit 0, hit enter, and work your way down through your list until you get down to the forest values. I'm going to have you, when you get to the forest values, what you need to do is you need to go ahead and change those out for ones. And again, there's some decision points on this, but I'm really just looking for forests. Oops. I need to make sure I go back and collect all of that. I'll go ahead and finish processing this and then restart the video. And if you were successful, you should have something that looks like this. All right, so this is a simplified version of your, I can go ahead and turn my buffer off real quick, but this is a simplified version of your raster layer, right? And so this is a representation of the landscape where we have two values. A value 0 that is everything else, and a value 1 that is all the forest land, right? And that's just the simplified version. In our next video, I'll show you how to process it and how to integrate it with vector data.